Arrogant employer accuses maid of stealing from her home without evidence, tears her uniform searching for the stolen item. But then something unexpected happens. Elizabeth was only 25 years old. A dedicated young woman who'd been working for only a few months in Mrs. Anna's and her husband Anthony's house. Recently married, she lived with her husband in a small house on the outskirts, struggling to build a better life. Mrs. Anna, a proud woman with a severe temperament, was known for her rigidity and uncompromising demands on the servants, while Anthony, her husband, was a calm and just man who balanced his wife's strong temper with patience. Despite the constant pressure, Elizabeth remained diligent and attentive, trying to please in order to secure her position in this much-needed job. Her eyes conveyed a mix of hope and shyness, traits of someone who was willing to face challenges but was still learning to navigate the complexities of adult life. That morning, Elizabeth got out of the small car she shared with her husband, adjusting the strap of her bag on her shoulder as she walked toward the back gate of Anna and Anthony's large property. As usual, he gave her a quick kiss and an encouraging smile before heading to work. She opened the back door, greeting some of the other employees who were already busy with their morning tasks. "Good morning, Emma," Elizabeth said, as an older woman, her hair hurriedly pinned into a bun, arranged a sideboard. "Good morning, Elizabeth. Ready for another day?" Emma responded with a tired smile. Elizabeth nodded and went to the small dressing room designated for the staff. There, she changed her casual clothes for the impeccable maid uniform, adjusting it carefully before briefly checking herself in the mirror. Satisfied, she returned to the kitchen where the warm pans from breakfast preparation sat on the counter. "These dishes need a good scrubbing," Emma commented, pointing to the full sink. "Leave it to me," Elizabeth replied promptly, putting on her apron and starting her work. As she scrubbed the plates and bowls, two other maids, Susan and Sophia, approached to get cups and utensils. "The day seems calm today," Susan commented as she put the cups back in the cupboard. "For now," Sophia responded with a smile, stirring the juice pitcher. "You know how things change here in the blink of an eye." Elizabeth, rinsing the dishes, joined the conversation. "Have you both worked here for long?" Susan shook her head. 4 years. I've seen it all, but nothing beats the times when Mrs. Anna's in a bad mood. Better prepare yourself." Sophia gave a short but supportive laugh. "She has her bad days, sure, but if you do everything right, there's nothing to worry about." Elizabeth only smiled shyly, while the conversation continued with comments about the week's tasks and some innocent gossip about the house's routine. However, the sudden sound of hurried footsteps echoing down the hallway interrupted the conversation. The atmosphere in the kitchen changed immediately. "Where is she? Where's the new maid?" Anna's loud, sharp voice cut through the hallway and reached the kitchen like thunder. All the staff froze, their eyes full of tension and curiosity. Anna appeared at the door like a storm, her firm footsteps echoing on the floor and her serious face radiating authority and indignation. Elizabeth felt her blood run cold in her veins. She knew Anna was talking about her. She swallowed hard, trying to control the trembling in her hands as she stepped forward hesitantly. "I'm here, Mrs. Anna," she said, her voice fragile, almost inaudible. Anna entered the kitchen with deliberate movements, her eyes fixed on Elizabeth like sharp knives. She stopped right in front of her, tilting her head slightly, as if a lion studying its prey. "Elizabeth, that's your name, right?" she asked, her sweet tone masking something much crueler. "Yes, ma'am," Elizabeth answered, trying to maintain composure despite her weakening legs. Anna raised an eyebrow, pretending to be surprised. "Elizabeth, you were cleaning the second-floor rooms yesterday, weren't you?" Elizabeth shook her head quickly, eager to clarify. "No, Mrs. Anna, I only cleaned the first floor. The rooms are Emma's responsibility." "Oh, yes, of course. Emma," Anna said, briefly glancing at the older maid, who immediately lowered her eyes, uncomfortable. Then she turned her attention back to Elizabeth. "Well, you see, Elizabeth, yesterday one of my bracelets disappeared. A very expensive bracelet, you understand? Something that could never just vanish. Nothing has ever disappeared in this house before you arrived." Elizabeth's eyes widened as the accusation began to sink in, weighing on her like an unbearable burden. I don't know what you're talking about. I would never take anything that wasn't mine," she said, her voice trembling. Anna stepped closer, invading Elizabeth's personal space, her imposing presence making the young woman instinctively step back. "Are you sure, Elizabeth? Because if you return it now, perhaps I will be generous enough not to call the police." The suggestion hung in the air like a sinister threat. Elizabeth felt the ground give way beneath her. "I swear, Mrs. Anna, I didn't take anything. I don't know where your bracelet is." Anna narrowed her eyes, her expression now filled with coldness and disdain. "Don't lie to me, girl. Someone like you, who comes here full of smiles and false promises, thinking they can take advantage. You're all the same. I open the doors to my house, and how am I repaid? With betrayal." "That's not true," Elizabeth pleaded, her voice almost a whisper. "I would never do that. Never." "Don't treat me like a fool," Anna shouted, her voice rising like a whip that made everyone in the kitchen flinch. "I know it was you. From the day you arrived, something told me you weren't trustworthy. And now here you are, with your saintly face, trying to fool me." Elizabeth's eyes began to tear up. She looked around, hoping for some support from her colleagues' faces, but all she found were looks of shock and discomfort. Everyone seemed paralyzed by the intensity of the situation. "Mrs. Anna, Elizabeth started but was abruptly cut off. "Shut up," Anna snapped, pointing an accusing finger at her. "You're going to return that bracelet now, or I'll make sure you pay for this. I'll call the police, and they will make sure everyone knows what kind of person you are. You know what happens to thieves, don't you? It's jail, Elizabeth. You'll spend years there." Elizabeth clutched her chest, feeling her heart race almost painfully. "Please, Mrs. Anna, I didn't do anything. I would never steal. Please believe me." But Anna had lost all patience. Her eyes burned with anger, and her voice, once controlled, was now pure fury. "Do you think I'll believe you? A mere maid with no references, with nothing? Do you think you can come into my house and do whatever you want? You're nothing but an ingrate, a thief." Elizabeth's face burned with shame and humiliation. Tears were now streaming down her face, but she couldn't speak. Her throat felt too tight. Anna, seeing the young woman immobilized, approached even closer, lowering her voice to something quiet and threatening. "You must be hiding that bracelet somewhere, right? Maybe in your uniform's pocket, or maybe you're wearing it right now." Before Elizabeth could react, Anna reached out and grabbed the top of the young woman's uniform. With a sudden, forceful motion full of contempt, she yanked the fabric hard, nearly tearing it apart. The sound of the fabric ripping echoed in the kitchen, followed by a crushing silence. Elizabeth stood still, only in the thin clothes she wore underneath, her face drenched in utter humiliation. Her entire body trembled. Tears flowed in torrents down her cheeks, and her stifled sobs were the only sounds in the kitchen. The other staff members looked on, shocked, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. The air in the kitchen felt heavy, suffocating, as Anna, still seething with rage, stood in front of Elizabeth like a predator who had just destroyed its prey. Elizabeth, with trembling hands and eyes filled with tears, saw her colleagues' gazes fixed on her. She felt like the ground could open up at any moment, and maybe that would be better than the suffering she was enduring now. Anna, still glaring at Elizabeth, snorted in rage and crossed her arms. "If you're not wearing it, you must have hidden it somewhere. Or better yet, you took it home, didn't you? You think you're going to get away with this? You're very mistaken." Her voice cut through the air like blades, and the staff remained motionless, their looks oscillating between shock and pity. Elizabeth, her hands trembling as she tried to cover what was left of her dignity, couldn't respond. The humiliation consumed her entirely, leaving her speechless. Her tears continued to fall, splashing on the kitchen floor as she struggled to breathe. Suddenly, a male voice echoed from the door. "Anna, what's all this shouting about?" Anthony appeared, his face furrowed in concern. His eyes quickly scanned the kitchen until they landed on the scene. Elizabeth crying, her clothes torn on the floor, the other servants visibly disconcerted, and Anna standing there with an expression of unrelenting anger. Anthony stepped inside, fixing his gaze on his wife. "What's going on here?" His voice was deep, almost threatening, though still carrying an undertone of disbelief. Anna immediately took the lead, raising her head as if she were completely in control of the situation. "Anthony, you know that gold bracelet I have? The one you gave me for our last anniversary? Well, it's gone. And look, the only logical explanation is this girl right here." She pointed at Elizabeth with disdain. "She's the last one hired, and nothing has ever gone missing in this house before she came." Anthony's eyes widened slightly in surprise, but Anna didn't give him time to intervene. "I tore her uniform because I needed to make sure she wasn't wearing the bracelet hidden. And as you can see, it wasn't on her, but it's obvious she must have taken it home. There's no other explanation." Anthony's expression changed with each of his wife's words. First confusion, then disbelief, and finally something close to contained rage. He looked at Elizabeth, who was still crying, her head lowered, trying to say something between sobs. I didn't steal anything," Elizabeth said, her voice low and broken but full of desperation. "I would never do that. I don't even go into the second-floor rooms." "Shut up!" Anna suddenly shouted, cutting off Elizabeth. Her voice was sharp, full of authority. "Enough with the lies!" But before Elizabeth could react, Anthony, with an explosion of fury, raised his voice like no one there had ever heard before. "Enough, Anna! Enough right now!" His voice thundered through the kitchen, making everyone recoil in shock. Anna turned to him with wide eyes, clearly stunned by the intensity of her husband, something she had never witnessed before. "Anthony, she began, but he interrupted immediately, pointing a firm finger at her. "No, not another word." He stepped forward, his face filled with rage. "Do you have any idea what you just did? Do you have any idea the humiliation you just imposed on this woman?" He pointed to Elizabeth, who was still trembling, her eyes swollen with tears, trying to cover herself uselessly with the rags of her uniform. "Look at her, Anna. Look at her." Anna tried to look away, but Anthony wouldn't let her. "No, you will look at her. You will see what you've done. You will see the damage your arrogance and inhumanity caused," he shouted, his tone becoming more and more filled with indignation. "Do you see it, Anna? Do you see how you made her cry? How you reduced her to this?" "Anthony, I needed to know if she—" Anna stammered, but the force of his voice made her words falter. "If she had what, Anna? The bracelet?" Anthony spat the words, his eyes flashing with rage. "Well, let me clarify something for you. I took the bracelet. I took it," he shouted, and the revelation hit everyone like a crushing weight. "You?" Anna murmured, her face filled with disbelief. "Yes, me," he confirmed, stepping forward. "I took it to the jeweler. I was going to surprise you, Anna. I was going to get another one made for our anniversary. And you know what you did? Do you know what you did? You turned today into a nightmare because of your arrogance, your lack of control, your utter disregard for people. Anthony, I didn't know, She tried again, but he interrupted once more. "Shut up, just shut up, Anna," he roared, his voice filling the kitchen. "You tore apart an innocent person's uniform. You exposed her, humiliated her in front of everyone. You called her a thief, an ingrate, things that should never have come out of your mouth." He pointed again at Elizabeth. who was sobbing in silence, unable to say anything. All of this why? Because you can't see past your own ego. Anna, now completely cornered, began to murmur something, but Anthony wouldn't let her continue. No, Anna, now you're going to listen to me. You're going to hear what I have to say, because I'm done. I'm done watching your arrogance know no bounds. The staff around them watched in complete silence, some still trying to process what was happening. Anthony turned to Elizabeth, his expression softening slightly, though still filled with sadness. He took a deep breath before speaking, his voice a bit more controlled but still full of emotion. Elizabeth, I'm so sorry. From the bottom of my heart, I'm so sorry. His voice faltered slightly and he paused, visibly shaken. Elizabeth slowly lifted her eyes, still clutching the remnants of her uniform, unsure of what to say. I don't know what to say, she whispered, her voice almost inaudible. You don't need to say anything, he responded, leaning in slightly so that his eyes were at the same level as hers. You didn't do anything wrong. You've been nothing but professional since the day you came here, and I'm so sorry you had to go through this. It was a monstrous mistake, and I take full responsibility for not stopping it from happening. He turned back to Anna, his tone hardening once again. And you, Anna, what do you have to say? Are you going to keep pretending you're right? Are you going to keep acting like you had any justification for what you just did? Anna, now with teary eyes, lowered her head, unable to meet her husband's gaze. I'm sorry, she said finally, but her voice was weak, lacking conviction. No, not like that, Anthony said, pointing at her firmly. You're going to apologize for real, Anna, and you're going to look her in the eye while you do it. Because if you don't, I swear you'll regret it like you never have before in your life. Anna, visibly shaken by Anthony, took a deep breath and looked up at Elizabeth, but hesitated. I'm sorry, Elizabeth, she said at last, though her voice still sounded hollow. Elizabeth remained silent for a moment, tears still streaming down her face. I accept your apology, Mrs. Anna, she said, her voice weak but full of dignity. But I can't keep working here. What happened today is something I will never forget. The silence that followed was heavy, almost suffocating. Anthony closed his eyes for a moment, seemingly absorbing Elizabeth's words. Then he approached her again, his expression deeply sad. Elizabeth, I wanted to ask you to stay, but I completely understand your decision. All I can do now is apologize once again. For myself, for my wife, for everything that happened today. Elizabeth simply nodded, unable to say anything else. Anthony sighed and added, You will receive fair compensation for the excellent work you did here, and as an apology for all you've suffered. Then he turned to Anna, who now seemed like a shadow of herself, her head lowered and shoulders slumped. I want you in my office. Now, he said in a grave tone, not waiting for an answer. He left the kitchen, leaving everyone immersed in oppressive silence. A few seconds after Anthony left, Anna finally lifted her head. Her eyes were glazed, and her lips trembled as if they wanted to say something, but no words came out. She looked around, met the fixed and judging gazes of the employees, and quickly turned, leaving the kitchen in absolute silence. Walking hesitantly, as if the weight of Anthony's words pushed her down, Anna headed to the office. When she arrived, she opened the door slowly and entered without being invited to sit. She stood in front of the desk, motionless, as Anthony sat in his chair, his eyes fixed on some papers that he didn't seem to be reading. Without raising his gaze immediately, Anthony took a deep breath. Then he lifted his eyes and stared at her, his face calm, but his eyes burning with a mixture of disillusionment and firmness. I want a divorce, he said, his voice sounding definitive and unshakable. Anna blinked several times, as if the words hadn't been understood immediately. You can't be serious, Anthony, she said, her voice laden with disbelief. Because of this, because of what happened today, it was a mistake, a mistake. A mistake, he repeated, leaning slightly forward, his voice still controlled, but full of a tone that made her tremble. A mistake, Anna, is something that happens without intention. You knew exactly what you were doing, and what you did today is much more than a mistake. It was inhumane. Anthony, please listen, she began, but he raised a hand, silencing her. No, now you're going to listen to me, he said firmly as he reclined in his chair. I've always known about your temperament. I've always known about your arrogance. From the start, I knew you had a difficult temperament, but I tried to make this marriage work. He paused, his eyes locked on hers, which were now filled with tears. Do you know why? Out of respect for your father. Anna sniffled, confused, and tried to say something, but he continued without allowing any interruptions. Your father is a good man. He helped me a lot in the past when I had nothing. And because of that, I felt indebted. I felt obligated to endure things that no one should endure. But today you crossed every line. Anthony, I can change, Anna said, her voice now desperate. I know I did wrong. It was horrible what I did, but give me a chance. I swear I'll change. I'll never act like this again. Anthony slowly shook his head, his eyes filled with deep sadness. Some things can't be undone, Anna. What you did today wasn't just wrong. It was cruel. You tore apart an innocent person's dignity, humiliated her in front of everyone. I can't stay with someone capable of that. He paused again, his voice becoming even more serious. My respect for you ended today. Anna began to cry openly, tears running down her face. Please, Anthony, forgive me. I'll change. I can change. He slowly stood up, walked over to the window and looked outside for a moment. Then he turned back to her. This decision is final. I won't go back. We've passed the point of repair, Anna. It's not just about today. It's about everything you are and everything you chose to be. She tried to speak again, but he simply looked at her firmly. It's over. Meanwhile, Elizabeth, still trembling, went up to the servants' quarters. Struggling, she changed into the clothes she had arrived in that morning. When she came down, Anthony was already waiting for her in the entrance hall. His eyes were tired, but he held his dignity in his posture. Elizabeth, he began, his voice full of sincerity, there's nothing I can do to erase what happened today. All I can do now is try to make amends for whatever is possible. Here is your compensation. He handed her a thick envelope filled with money. I insisted that it be a significant sum, not only for the excellent work you did here, but also as an apology for everything you suffered. Elizabeth took the envelope with trembling hands, but didn't say anything. He continued, in addition, I've arranged for unlimited access to therapy sessions with a psychologist of your choice. It's important to me that you have the support necessary to overcome what happened. Elizabeth nodded slowly, the tears still falling down her face. Thank you, Mr. Anthony, truly, but I need to go now. Of course, he replied, bowing his head respectfully. If you need anything at all, don't hesitate to reach out. You'll always be welcome, no matter where you are. With her head held high, a mix of dignity and sadness in her heart, Elizabeth left the house for the last time. That had been a traumatic experience, but over time, she found the strength to move on. Therapy helped her regain her self-esteem, and she got a new job at a place where she was treated with respect and dignity. Elizabeth also started studying, determined to build a better future. Anthony, for his part, followed through with his decision to divorce Anna. A few weeks later, the process was finalized, and Anna had to deal with the consequences of her actions alone. Anthony found a new peace in his life, dedicating himself to his work and reconnecting with the values he had always cherished: justice and respect for others. Elizabeth's story became a milestone for all involved, a painful reminder of the consequences of arrogance, but also proof that with dignity and strength, it is possible to start anew. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, give it a like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. See you in the next story.